Alrighty, so hands are washed. Alright, so we have elderberry and holy basil are two that, Shanika, of course you want the holy basil. I'm not going to do holy basil, just because it has a rather boring percentage of alcohol. So I'll discuss it, but I'm not going to use it as a demo because it's not as helpful for the purposes of our class, although actually it is. Yeah, let's start out with the holy basil. So we'll do two because we've got an hour, so we can do two, and heck, maybe we can even get three in there. Probably not. We'll stick with two. So holy basil, or tulsi. So we'll have one herb that we will tincture is holy basil, and then I want a root or a bark. I need a dense root or a bark or a resinous plant. So any requests for any dense roots or barks or resinous plants? Otherwise, I'll just do some kava because we always need more kava tincture. Kava sound good? All right, I hear no one saying no, so we'll do kava. All right, so the two, that's going to be, and so astragalus would be, did you say ashwagandha? Oh, looky, y'all. Sorry, Connie Sue. Ashwagandha actually would be great, but I just did a batch of ashwagandha. At first I thought you were going to say astragalus. I thought that was astragalus because I'm a little bit far away from the screen. And one thing, and we touched on this a little bit in the tea making class, is that when we're working with medicine making, the first thing that you want to be mindful of is the solubility of the plant constituents, also known as what does the plant like. And astragalus doesn't like alcohol. Astragalus loves water. Astragalus really loves water. And so we want to keep astragalus as a water extract and not as a tincture. So I don't make astragalus as a tincture. But you didn't ask about astragalus as a tincture. You asked about ashwagandha as a tincture. But still, we're going to do kava. So we'll look at kava and tulsi as tinctures because those are going to give us two really important concepts that we'll be able to apply. No, astragalus doesn't like vinegar. It likes water. Astragalus just really likes water. Unfortunately, that means that it's not really a great plant. If you want to make a tincture with astragalus, you'd want to keep it at a really low alcohol percentage. So I'm getting ahead of myself. So we got our two herbs for the day. We've got kava and tulsi. So I'm going to go into some of the basics of tincturing. I'm going to put on the light. Again, I turned this on before I was actually fully ready to go, and so I'm kind of a little bit discombobulated because I caught myself before I was ready to go. But that's fine. We can do that. I'm just going to turn on the light so it might be a little bit easier for you to see, and then I'll be right back. I generally leave these lights off because these lights go to the apothecary and I don't like them having direct light on them, so I keep these lights off unless I'm teaching. And you saw I have my portable dry erase board. Maybe I'll bring that a little bit closer because I can't teach this class without a dry erase board. There is going to be a little bit of algebra in this, and I don't want you to be afraid of the algebra. I want you to know it, and I'd like you to practice it, but you're not my students officially, so you do you. But you have to know, if you're going to make good tinctures, you need to know what a good tincture looks like. what a bad tincture looks like, and the difference between the two. So I'm going to show you two primary processes today, known as the Folk method and the weight to volume method. The weight to volume method is a method of tincture making that gives you more of a clinical strength tincture, a tincture that generally we as practicing herbalists use for our clients and for ourselves. Folk method is the one that you're generally going to see in most books on medicine making. You're usually going to see the folk method. So let's talk about the folk method of tincture making. In the folk method, what is suggested is that you grab your, hold on. You grab your alcohol. Here's some various batches of alcohol that I have in my back room. So you're going to choose your alcohol. Let's talk about choosing the alcohol first. In a folk method, you're covering your herbs with alcohol and letting them sit for a span of time and then extracting them. So the first question is what kind of alcohol you're going to use. One answer to that is whatever alcohol you have around. And so if you have vodka, vodka is generally used. When you're getting alcohol, remember in the tea class, we talked about the importance of using a hungry solvent, the distilled water versus tap water versus alkaline water. A hungry solvent is going to be able to extract more of the constituents in the plants, and that's what we're looking for in our solvent. So a clear solvent, this is clear because it's empty, but I have it, I don't know why I have it around because I haven't gotten to recycling it yet. But a clear alcohol, vodka versus rum. Rum has flavoring compounds in it, and it has pigments in it. That means it is inherently less hungry than vodka, which has no flavoring and no coloring. So you're going to be able to pull more stuff into vodka than you are rum. If you use gin, I love me some gin. Gin is wonderful, but gin also has a number of flavor compounds. That's what makes it taste so delicious, is all of those flavor compounds that have passed through distillation. The presence of the flavor compounds in the gin also make it a less effective solvent for extraction of the stuff. So that being said, if gin is what you have, or rum is what you have, or brandy, or tequila, or whatever, go ahead and use what you have. Just be mindful of the fact that that may not be quite as strong as a clear, unscented, uncolored, unflavored type of alcohol. Gin makes some pretty fun tinctures, but they're not that strong. So and then one other one that you'll quite often see is cane alcohol. So this is a 34. So this is a 68%. I'm going to show you here. So we have two measurements of alcohol that we have listed on labels. One of them is proof. The proof is double the percentage of alcohol. So this one is a 34% alcohol by volume. So the proof on that would be a 68 proof. 68 proof. So it's a 68 proof alcohol. Now, that means that this is 34% water. That means alcohol. That means it's 76% water. This is mostly water. So this is an effective solvent 4 herbs that mostly like water, because this is mostly water, right? Your standard vodka is going to be 80 proof, which is 40% alcohol. That's 40% alcohol and 60% water. Sometimes you can find Smirnoff makes a 100 proof alcohol, so that's 100 proof is 50% alcohol, so that's a 50-50 alcohol water, and that actually will give you, as a default solvent to use, half and half. You got a 50% chance that that your plant is going to like something that you're providing it with, and a lot of plants love that 50% alcohol, 50% water combination. A lot of plants like 40%, and many plants like 34%. We're going to get into that. But just understand that variation in the alcohol content, right? My preference, if you're just going to have one alcohol, is to get the 100 proof and have that around. If you really hate algebra, and as soon as I use the A word, you're like, oh, hell no, I don't want to do this, what you can do is go buy an array of alcohols and have a 34%, have a 40%, have a 50%, have a 75.5%, is a 151 proof, have a range of percentage of alcohol that you can just grab, so that when I go into the algebra portion of this tutorial, you can just go la 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 la, I don't hear you, I don't do algebra, nothing. But when you learned algebra and they said it would be applicable later on in life, tincture making is what they were talking about. So what I do want to point out with all of these bottles is they are made of glass. Remember that we're working with solvents, and alcohol is a great solvent, and if it is packaged in plastic, there's going to be some movement of the plastic into the liquid because it's a solvent. And so don't buy alcohol packaged in plastic. It's not a good idea. Just like we don't want the distilled water in plastic, we don't want our alcohol in plastic. So one other alcohol option, which is not a good one, but I just wanted to show you because she was right there, is Damiana liqueur. Damiana liqueur. This is just some of the tastiest stuff. In fact, I don't care if it's 9 a.m. in the morning. I'm just going to have a little bit of Damiana liqueur. Because it's so good. Crap as a solvent for medicine making. Crap as a solvent for medicine making. So full of Damiana, a little bit of sugar, some colorants. There's just not a lot of room for anything else that you're going to be wanting to make with your medicine. So if you use a flavored liqueur, you might think it's fun to think of some spiced rum or coconut rum or something, but you're not going to get that much medicine out, and it's somewhat disrespectful to the plants that you're going to be extracting in there, and it's just not good medicine making. So make your plain tincture and add it to your flavorings, your flavored tinctures. And if you've never had Damiana liqueur, get some Damiana liqueur, not only for the lovely bottle, which is lovely, but because it's tasty, tasty stuff, even at 9 in the morning. All right, what I use in my medicine making is this. So this is 190 proof organic cane alcohol. I buy this in 5-gallon tubs from the Organic Alcohol Company. It's formerly Alchemical Solutions. They're up in Oregon, because I'm on the West Coast. So wherever you are, there may be an alcohol supplier around you. This one is mine. In California, we have a limit to the amount of alcohol that we can have buy off of the shelves at 120 proof. It used to be 151, and it's dropped down to 120. 60% alcohol is the top that we can get, which sucks for medicine making. So I just buy my own alcohol, and I'm going to I'm not going to be making a folk method tincture today because I don't like making folk method tinctures. But we will pretend that I would be using the Tito's vodka. This is good vodka, by the way. We'll pretend I'm using the Tito's vodka. So in the folk method, what we do is we take herbs and we put them into a jar, and then we cover the herbs with alcohol. If I was going to be using the kava, I would put kava into a jar, and then I would cover by about an inch, just fill it up with alcohol by about an inch, and cap it, label it, because you always want to label your stuff, and then I would leave that there for X length of time. We'll go into time in a little bit. Shaking it every day. At the end of X length of time, we would strain it, and we would have a tincture. Would that tincture be a strong tincture? Maybe, maybe not. You don't know. Let's look at some of the problems with the folk method. Number one is put your herbs into a jar and cover with alcohol. Well, how much herbs are you putting into that jar? What's the volume? How much plant material are you putting in there? You have to know the concentration of constituents in your plant material to know how strong it's going to be. Perfect example of this, I'm going to show you what 1 ounce looks like of, this is 1 ounce of, oh no, that works well. This is 1 ounce of burdock root. All right, 1 ounce by weight of burdock root is not very much burdock root because it's dense, right? So if I were to fill up a jar with my burdock root, just pouring it in there and filling it up, I'd have a lot of burdock root. That would be a nice, strong tincture. Possibly too strong because it's really, really dense. And so I might be using more plant material than the solvent can actually extract. And so I would have a nice, strong tincture and also a bunch of just wet burdock that hadn't been extracted because the tincture at a certain point becomes saturated with constituents and it will not be an effective solvent. The amount of constituents held in the medium, in the solvent, is going to be equal to the amount of constituents in the plant material, and no more will be pulled out into solution. And so that's wasteful to the plant material. So that's 1 ounce of burdock, very dense. It could make a very nice strong tincture. It could be too much. This is not quite 1 ounce of mullein. 1 ounce, 1 ounce. So if I'm putting 1 ounce of mullein into my jar and covering it with alcohol, I'm going to have, well, this is mostly air, right? There's not a lot of plant material in here. So I would make a really weak medicine because I don't know the weight, I don't know how much plant material is in there. I mean, you can look, you can see. That's mostly air. This is one of the problems with making mullein tincture. Oh, in fact, I'll do another tincture making intensive doing percolation, because percolation is the best way to work with something that is this fluffy and light and problematic. So I'm not going to go through it right now. But so there's one of the problems with the folk method is that you're going to have a lot of variation in the amount of plant material in your finished product because you're not weighing it out. You don't know how much that is. The other thing is that if I am doing if I'm making 2 tinctures, and one of them is cottonwood buds, and one of them is astragalus, because we were talking about astragalus, and I'm just pouring 40 proof vodka over those, right? Throwing it in, pouring 40 proof vodka, letting it sit there. Well, cottonwood buds are super resinous. They're lovely, gorgeous, beautiful resinous, and the 60% water in here is not doing them any favors. They don't want the water, they want alcohol, and so this is a poor solvent for this plant. And this plant, the astragalus, really likes water. That 40% alcohol isn't going to make it happy. It likes the water. And so this is going to be a poor solvent for this plant too. Both of these plants on opposite ends of the solvent spectrum versus polar and non-polar constituents makes that whole just pour vodka over your medicine thing possibly really weak medicine because it might be too strong or too weak in the tincture making. Does that make sense? I'm going to assume that makes sense. If you have any questions, this is nice because it's actually moving up so I can see your comments, which is unlike what it does on Monday mornings, and I don't know what I've done differently because technology. Okay, so that's the folk method that we're not going to do. The method that I would like you to learn is called the weight to volume method. And when you come in here for a class, you'll always see that my bottles, where's a tincture bottle? Okay, my bottles, this is an Usnea bottle, so you're going to have those numbers down at the bottom, right? 1 to 5, 50%. Whenever you buy a tincture, it's a good idea. Look for those numbers. A well-made tincture should have those numbers. Those numbers tell you a lot of information about the tincture. So what that says is that 1 to 5, for every 1 ounce by weight, of plant material, we have 5 ounces by volume of menstruum, of your solvent. This is a standard weight to volume ratio. For most tinctures, this is going to be the ratio. This is the ratio of plant to solvent that allows us to fully extract most constituents into solution without oversaturating, without wasting plant material, and without wasting our solvent. So that ratio for dried plant material is pretty stable. Sometimes with certain plants like the cottonwood buds, I would go to a 1 to 3 because I'm really looking for those resins, and the resins are not very concentrated in the plant. So a 1 to 3 volume is going to give me more alcohol to pull more of the constituents that I want. Hi, Mickey. Yeah, I know, they can be a little bit confusing until you know, and then they're like, oh, yeah, that's easy. All right? So 1 to 5 weight to volume, that's what that means. The percentage is always the amount of alcohol. So that 50% means 50% alcohol and 50% water. But if I had a 75%, 1 to 5, 75%, that would mean that I had 75% alcohol. So the default water in there would be 25%, right? So we don't put the amount of water in there. The assumption is that you can do some simple math and understand that 75% alcohol means 25% water. Yeah. We can also tweak some other solvents, and I'll go into that in just a little bit. So 1 to 5 weight to volume, and then we have our percentage of alcohol. Now the percentage of alcohol is going to vary tremendously from the lowest point of 25%. 25% is considered to be the minimum amount of alcohol that you can have in a tincture to make it shelf stable. Under that, there's a possibility of it spoiling. And you don't want to do that. You don't want to go through all of the trouble of making your tinctures and then have them go funky. So 25% to 95%. So, let's talk about that. So 95%, the alcohol, the pure alcohol that I get is 190 proof. 190 proof. And that means that it is 95% alcohol. Because pure alcohol, if I got 200 proof alcohol, which you see sometimes out there, you'll see 200 proof alcohol. But 200 proof alcohol, which would be 100% alcohol, no water, but that is hygroscopic. Hygroscopic, there's a vocab word for you. Hygroscopic. Hygroscopic means that that is a compound. Yeah, Terry, that's exactly it. So hygroscopic means it's going to be drawing moisture from the atmosphere to itself, right? So pure alcohol is hygroscopic. It's not stable at 100%. It is going to, if this was a 200 proof alcohol, and I took the top off, immediately it would start drawing moisture from the atmosphere into itself because it's not stable at 100%. And it's going to continue to draw moisture to itself until it gets to about 95% alcohol. 95% alcohol is where alcohol and water stabilizes, right? So even if you have 200 proof, it's going to end up being 190 proof eventually, because that's where it's stable. So that's why you always see 190 proof, almost always see 190 proof as the pure alcohol. We can, for all intents and purposes, we can use this in our math as 100%, or 95%, depending on how much of a Virgo you are. So, let's see. Sending love to my Virgos, but y'all know that's just what you do. So, hygroscopicity, I don't know if that's a word, it's a word now, is a thing, and that's why the 190 proof. All right, so Terry brought up, Terry uses grain alcohol, so the source of alcohol, let's talk about that, really big issue. The source of alcohol, you can ferment almost anything, right? So the vast majority of alcohols generally are grain-based. They go through distillation, right? So in distillation, we are taking a fermented product, this fermented formed alcohol. We distill it. The alcohol is a very low molecular weight compound, rises up through distillation and collects, and we concentrate it. Once alcohol goes through distillation, the theory is that none of the compounds that were in the original raw material exist in the finished alcohol. So if you use grain, if you used wheat, for example, if you used wheat and you fermented your wheat and then a distillation of wheat, so your grain alcohol is from wheat, in theory, there is no gluten or anything else in the finished product. Gluten is a large, complex molecule, large molecular weight, and proteins do not pass over distillation. They're not present in a distilled product. I've seen people with severe grain sensitivities respond to grain-based alcohols. I don't know how that works, because none of the compounds that were in the original raw material should have passed over distillation. But I've seen it happen. And so grain alcohol is super pure and fine to use. I have gone to cane alcohol because it is abundant, and there's no issues. I can just say to everyone who takes my tinctures, you know, there's never been any grain involved in the process, so they don't have to deal with that. Yeah, I don't really do vibrations, so I know a lot of people use that. Vibrations is a bit too woo-woo for me, but yeah, I mean, that certainly could be an answer, because there's something there. Yeah. Oh, that's, yeah. All right. Alcohol. So I like cane alcohol. You can use grape alcohol. I was using the grape alcohol from Alchemical Solutions for a number of years until they came out with the cane. Grape is a little bit more expensive, but boy, is it yummy tasting. But I like cane. Cane is great. We're really close to the border with Mexico, so we can also drive across the border and get alcohol down there. There's a limit to what we can bring up. So that also brings up corn alcohol, or organically grown. This is organic cane alcohol is what I use for all of mine, in theory and in practice. Also, any pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, fertilizers, genetically modified organisms, all of that also does not come over distillation and is not present in the finished alcohol product. There are more larger implications than just how it affects me, right? So yeah, if I buy genetically modified sprayed corn alcohol and use it for my tincture, there's not going to be any of that in the finished product, but I am voting for those farming processes with my money. By buying that type of alcohol, I'm saying, sure, I don't really like the use of pesticides or genetic modification of crops, but it's cheap, and so I'm going to buy that, and there's that. there's a whole bunch of issues around that. There's issues of access. Some people can't afford organic, non-genetically modified, blah, 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 alcohol. Use what you can get and be okay with that. Just understand that there are larger ramifications than how it affects you. There is how you are supporting farmers that are doing their work too. So lots to think about with that, right? So don't understand the chemistry of all of that. I don't do the vibrations. I don't know. But for me, organic cane alcohol is what we do. And as with the, I do actually have these labeled because I haven't had them labeled before and I have had them confused. Distilled water, just like we were talking about in the tea making video, we want all of our solvents to be as hungry as possible. So distilled water as your water, and then your unflavored blah 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 alcohol is going to be the hungriest of your solvents. Right? That's going to combine them together. So other things that we can add, so generally alcohol and water are our two primary solvents. But we can modify those a little bit, and here's where it gets kind of fun. If you are a geeky person who likes to play around with this, you can ignore this. If this is making you uncomfortable, you can ignore any of this if you're made uncomfortable. Where's my glycerin? Two things that you can add to your alcohol to modify your tincture making and enhance extraction of some constituents and inhibit activity of some constituents. One of them is vinegar. So if we add 10% vinegar, so we would have, let's see, in our percentage, so we have our weight to volume ratio, and then we're going to have our percentage of alcohol. Remember, when you have a single number, the default is going to be your alcohol. If there's a second number, and sometimes there is, we can also have percentage of vinegar or another acidifying compound. If you don't like the taste of vinegar, you can use citric acid is nice. Some people use lemon or another citrus juice. That's really hard to measure the acidity. I know that my vinegar is generally going to be 5% acidity and my citric acid is going to be really pure. I can measure those. It's hard to measure lemon juice. But again, you do you, and if you are into doing the folk method and just dumping everything in there, that's fine. By adding in 10% vinegar, or, whoops, that's 1%, 10%, by adding in a little bit of vinegar, we are now increasing the ability of our solvent combination to extract a little bit more stuff. So the stuff that likes vinegar, two primary classes of constituents. One of them is minerals. We generally don't use alcohol as a solvent for minerals. Minerals don't like alcohol. They like water, and they like acidity. They like vinegar. That's why acetums, oxymels, the vinegar extracts, and we'll do those in another tutorial, those are great for extraction of minerals because minerals like vinegar. Minerals hate alcohol. High alcohol or even moderate alcohol tinctures are not a source of minerals. Even you can't make, if you make an oat straw tincture, it's not an effective tincture to make. That's different from milky oats. We'll talk about that in next week's class when we talk about fresh plant tinctures. If you're making a tincture of like oat straw, well, don't, because there's nothing in oat straw that really wants to extract into tincture. It's going to be a waste of oat straw. You're going to have a weak tincture. It's not going to be effective. It's a waste of oat straw. Oat straw is abundant, but still. Nettles, you can make a tincture of nettles, and you'll get some of the other constituents from nettles that are really nourishing and really, really helpful and very important, but you will not be getting the mineral content of nettles. Even if you make a very, very, very low alcohol percentage, if you make a 25%, where's that Usnia bottle? Here you go. If you make a bottle of a nettles tincture at 25%, your minimum alcohol percentage, so this bottle would be 25% alcohol, 75% water, so all of that water is going to be extracting minerals. That's great, but you've got 3/4 of an ounce of strong nettle tea. Just make nettle tea, right? So don't make tinctures for mineral-rich plants. However, if you are making a tincture of a plant that happens to have a lot of other chemistry, because plant chemistry is very, very complex, and there's not just a single class of constituents there, and you want to enhance extraction of those minerals, you can just add a 10% of your solvents as vinegar. We'll go into that when we're doing the algebra. And that will enhance a little bit of extraction of minerals. The other things, and this is a more important issue, the other class of constituents that generally likes to be extracted in vinegar are alkaloids. So a lot of plants, plant constituents, some of the strongest constituents that we have in plants, also some of the most toxic, are alkaloids. And so those are the compounds that by and large end in INE, right? So that's caffeine and nicotine and cocaine and morphine and solanine and hyoscyamine and all of those enes. So as with that list, we have some really wonderful medicines, some medicines that can be really wonderful, but we want to use really respectfully, and some things that will kill you. If you make would that apply to, so that would not apply to nettle seed? Anita, that's a great question, because in nettle seed, we're using different constituents. Nettle seed tincture, awesome stuff. That's great stuff, because yeah, we're not using the nettle seed for the minerals. And again, you can, I'm not saying that nettle tincture is not effective. It's really effective. It's just not effective as a mineral source. If you're looking for nettles because it's really nourishing, it's really nourishing as a tea. So make it as a tea, or make it as a vinegar extract. If you're using it as an anti-inflammatory, as an allergy formula, I like nettle tincture for allergies. Works really well for that. So that's when you would use that. Nettle seed, yeah, definitely. But also nettle seed is just yummy, and it's precious. And I always feel guilty when I am straining out my nettle seed tincture. So I end up just kind of throwing the mark into something else and eating it. And eating nettle seeds, I think, is just the most respectful way to use them, because then you're just ingesting everything. All the issues of solubility are off the table. You're not dealing with it. If you're eating it, your digestive system is the solvent, and so you don't have to worry about solubility of plant constituents. All right. So we can add in vinegar for enhanced extraction of alkaloids, enhanced extraction of minerals for what that's worth. We can also add in glycerin, 10% glycerin. And this is what we're going to do with the tulsi. When we make our tulsi tincture, we're going to add 10% glycerin, because the benefit of glycerin primarily for me is that some plants, most of the Lamiaceae and a lot of plants contain tannins. So we talk about tannins a lot in classes, right? That almost always comes up when we're doing one of our Monday morning classes, because tannins are abundant in the plant kingdom. They like making tannins. They're really helpful for the health of the plant. They're helpful for us. We can really use tannins in healing if they are what we're looking for. However, tannins are grabby. That's why they're beneficial for binding tissues, for stopping bleeding, for inhibiting sweating, for stopping sweating in your pits, for that binding that you feel when you drink a tannin-rich tea and your mouth gets really dry, right? That is the binding of the tannins to the proteins in the mouth. And that's what tannins do. So they're grabby. They grab onto proteins. We can feel that in the mouth. They grab onto minerals. Tannins grab onto minerals to form insoluble mineral tannates. So if you make a tincture of a plant that is rich in minerals and rich in tannins, the calcium, the iron, say if you're making that nettle tincture, the nettle tincture, and you add to it, you want to make a nettle and rose. Nettle and rose, that sounds lovely, doesn't it? So you're making a nettle and rose tincture, and so you throw those together and you pour your vodka on them and you let them sit. Well, rose is very rich in tannins, and nettle is very rich in minerals. Nettle's got lots of calcium, lots of magnesium, and lots of iron, and lots of silica. Those are 4 of the minerals that are in the nettles. I don't know why I can't remember the name nettles. The grabby tannins are going to grab onto those minerals to form calcium tannate and magnesium tannate and iron tannate. And silica, I don't know if it complexes that, we'll say silica tannate. I don't know if that's actually a thing. But those now insoluble mineral salts, those are big, huge molecules that do not go back into solution, and they're no longer available to you. So the grabbiness of tannins, they like to grab onto minerals, they grab onto proteins, and they grab onto alkaloids. So if you're making an alkaloid-rich formula, say you want to make a first aid tincture with barberry and yarrow. Sounds like a great formula. It would be a great formula. But berberine alkaloids are some of the primary constituents in there. Yarrow's got tannins, and so you're going to, the tannins in the yarrow are going to bind to the alkaloids in the barberry and form precipitate. And you'll actually see it in your tincture. After a little bit of time, you'll see a little bit of sludge down at the bottom of your tincture. Those are all of the precipitates. Those are the things that have fallen out of solution in your formula, and they're no longer available for you in the tincture. You can shake up and take them, and sometimes you can still get absorption of things, and sometimes you can't, because the complexes that they've formed are not available in digestion. So you've just kind of lost those nutrients. So if you have a plant that is high in tannins, I like to just add a little bit of glycerin in there, because glycerin keeps the tannins happy. It kind of stops them from being quite so grabby to other stuff. So it's a thing that I generally do with most Lamiaceae, again, because they're tannin rich. All right, I'm chatting too much, and our hour's almost up. So I'm going to go into the process of making the tincture, and we will look at this. Okay, here comes the algebra. It's okay. We're going to take a deep breath. Algebra's our friend. This is one thing. Oh, Terry, I see that you are... Oh, glycerin as in soap. Yeah, okay, let's talk about glycerin. Okay, let's talk about glycerin. Glycerin is a byproduct of a number of different industries. So what glycerin is, glycerin and glycerol, those are synonyms. So glycerol is a backbone. We'll make a little backbone there. A backbone of fat structures. So fat, you can have fats as coconut oil or almond oil or lard or any other kind of oil. All of them have, it is our friend Francesca, so all of those oils, irrespective of the source, they all have a glycerol backbone, and then they have fatty acids attached to that. So there may be oleic acid, or there's stearic acid, or palmitic acid, or ricinoleic acid. 10 points to who knows where ricinoleic acid comes from. So we have these various different fatty acids, and they're all attached to this glycerol backbone. The various industries require those fatty acids for different stuff. Soap making is one of them. If any of these fatty acids are saponifiable, when we combine the fat with an alkali, like sodium hydroxide, lye, that's going to detach the fatty acids from the backbone, and the glycerin can be a byproduct of soap making. Quite often it is, because most soaps don't have what's called retained glycerin. If you are making soap at home, you're not... Oh, Terry gets the 10 points. Well done. You're not doing the separation out of the glycerin from the... And Brenda also gets 10 points. Well done. You're not separating that out. You're going to just mix it all up so there will be glycerin in your finished soap. But large-scale soap-making processes, the glycerin is siphoned off from that and sold to people as glycerin. Biofuel manufacture, various different industries require the use of fatty acids, and the glycerin is a byproduct of that. Because that, you don't always know if what source your glycerin comes from, what fat was it extracted from? Was it coconut? Was it palm? Was it lard? Most glycerin that we have access to nowadays is vegetable glycerin, because the default is, yeah, probably people are not going to want lard glycerin. I don't mind it. I eat animals, but not everyone does. And so, so most of the glycerin that you're going to find on the market these days is going to be a vegetable glycerin from a vegetable fat. However, also, most of it is palm. And that is a problem. Even if it's the RISPO, I think it's RISPO, is an organization that supposedly is working on sustainable agriculture and protection of palm habitats. I've heard from a number of activists that even RISPO certified palm products are not really optimal, and really just we should stay away from palm. Having said that, it's really hard to find. One of my primary sources for glycerin was a guaranteed coconut sourced, and is no longer. So there's that. We'll go into that a little bit more when we do glycerides. But so that's what glycerin is. Sorry, Francesca, I think it's your fault that I got down that rabbit hole there. All right, and there's no way we're gonna have time for for 2 tinctures, but we can do we can't do 3. We can do 2 tinctures in 15 minutes. We can totally do that. That's okay. All right, as long as you don't distract me by shiny things like, what's glycerin? Tulsi. Hold on. Hold on. I'm coming. The majority of your herb books, when they talk about tincture making, again, are generally going to talk about folk method. Some of them, the good ones, are going to give you a chart or list in the Materia Medica the optimal percentage of alcohol for each plant, because all of the different plants have specific requirements for the balance of alcohol to water and any other supplementary solvents that's going to make a tincture that has the chemical fingerprint that's going to be as close as possible to the herb itself. So you want this and this to be pretty darned close. Sometimes not, sometimes you want to adjust that, but we're not going to talk about that right now. So some books, this is Cheryl Tilgner's great book, has wonderful charts like this that give you percentage of tinctures, percentage of alcohol in your tinctures. Sometimes this is Charles Kane's herbal medicine book, and he will give, in the dosage recommendations, he'll give alcohol percentages. And then if you have, Lisa Canora. If you have Lisa's book, and if not, why not? She has a great chart of high, medium, and low alcohol percentages in your tincture making. I have well over 100 books on herbal medicine, and less than 10 of them have that information. The majority of them, if they talk about tincture making, they're talking about the folk method. And so that does you a disservice. It's a good idea to get books by that. By the way, Cheryl Tilgner's, a lot of that information is online, and on my website I have links to various Materia Medica for reference. And you can get her information. She's put it online because she's very generous with her information. So there's that. So if we go in there again and we look up, we'll look up in Cheryl's book. One of the problems with Cheryl's is that it doesn't always differentiate between what's made as a concentrated plant extract that I'm blanking on right now, and what's not. So another great source for finding your alcohol percentage, because it can be really hard to find the optimal percentage of alcohol for different tinctures. If you go on a website like Herb Farm is a great one because he makes so many different tinctures, and all Herb Farm tinctures are labeled really, really well. So go check out the label on an Herb Farm tincture, and you can find the proper alcohol percentage that Ed found for the tinctures that he makes, and I trust his information. So that's a really great way of cheating and finding your optimal alcohol percentage. So we've got a 50%. This is why, Shanika, this is why I didn't want to do the Tulsi. So we've got 50%. I'm going to do, what's the best source for learning what herbs' primary constituents are? That one. And also, too many books. Too many books, and I'm running out of time. Eric Yarnell also has a great book on phytochemistry. So Eric Yarnell's book on phytochemistry and Lisa Ganora's book on herbal constituents are the classic books on herbal constituents. Best books on them. We're going to do kava kava first, because that will give us a higher amount. So, oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, Janice. We have herb. I know, Terry. I know. I felt very guilty when I said too many books. I'm sorry. You're not too many. I love you, books. Herbal Constituents is one of them. And then Eric Yarnell's phytochemistry book. I don't remember the exact title, but Eric Yarnell's phytochemistry book is awesome. Great, great, great book. So, kava kava, we have our 1:5 ratio, and we're going to use 75% alcohol. All right? 1:5, 75% alcohol. Here is your algebra equation. We need to, oh, we didn't find out because I've been jumping all over the place because I blame the Damiana liqueur at the very beginning of the class. So we're going to have the volume of plant material that we're looking at. We're going to make, let's make 3 ounces. We're going to use 3 ounces of kava. 3 ounces of kava. You should grind it. I'm not gonna because time. I'll grind it afterwards. But 3 ounces of kava. Canning jar funnels. If you don't have canning jar funnels, get them. They're such a good tool. I love canning jar funnels. So I've got 3 ounces of kava in there. In my 1:5 ratio, for every 1 ounce by weight of the herbs, I'm using 5 ounces by volume of my menstruum. So I've got 3 ounces here. How many ounces of my menstruum am I going to use? This isn't the algebra yet. boop, 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 boop. There you go, Sasha. Good job. Yes, 15. So for every 3 ounces, we're using 5 ounces, so 3 times 5, that's how you found what Sasha did, is going to be 15. So I have 15 ounces of solvent is what I'm going to be looking for. There y'all go. Hi, Nan, I miss you. So 15 ounces. That is my total volume of my menstruum that I'm going to be using. That's the first number that we use in our algebraic equation. And now I'm going to look at the amount of alcohol that I want in my finished product, right? So I am desirous of a 75% finished product. So that's going to be on the top, 75%. 15 by 0.75. Where is my calculator? I know y'all have fancy phones that do your calculating for you, but some of us are old school still. So, 15 times 0.75 is 11.25. And then I'm going to divide that by the amount of alcohol that is in the alcohol that I have on hand, right? So, what I have on hand is 95%, right? So I am going to, oh, there you go, Francesca. Do you have a calculator or are you going all phone? Yeah. So 11.25 divided by 0.95 is 10.6875. I feel free, totally fine, to adjust that to either 10.5, 10.5. I'll stick with 10.5. You could also go to 11. That's totally fine. These numbers are not as exact as we would sometimes have you think that they are. There's always a range. When I teach this to my students, I give them a list that I have compiled from all of my different sources, and it shows a really wide variation in herbalists that I deeply admire. Deeply admire. These are people who I've taken as my mentors and my teachers, and they have big disagreements in what the exact number of the perfect alcohol percentage is for the plants. So don't be frustrated by that. Let that tell you that there's a range that is really good, and if you're close to that range, it's close enough. That's one of the things that I really like about Lisa's book, is that she gives us low, medium, and high alcohol percentages. That's where they need to be. You have a fancy calculator on your phone. You're so fancy. So yes, and so you can also make up a jar of 75% alcohol, or if you're a person who has access to 151 proof alcohol, that's 75.5% alcohol. Remember at the very beginning I said you can just have some 75% alcohol, and 50% alcohol, and 40% alcohol, and 30% alcohol, and some 95% alcohol. Have a wide range of alcohols, and then you just pour them over. Totally, you are allowed to do that. But you should know this. You should have this as a tool in your toolkit. Even if you choose not to use it, it's always good to know the tools. Yeah? So that's why we're doing this. So this number, that is the equation. That's all the algebra you have to do. That's all. It was over. It was relatively painless, and I'm going to do it a couple of times so that you get it, so you get a feel for it, right? So this number that you finish with is the amount of alcohol that we want in our finished product. So the amount of alcohol is 10.5% alcohol, which means not percent. That's ounces. 10.5 ounces of alcohol, which means that the water is the balance. So 15 minus 10.5 is 4.5 ounces of water. And then you always do your math, because sometimes, especially if you're doing your brain, sometimes you mess up. 10.5, that's 15. Yep, and 15 equals 15. Yeah? You are a Gemini. Yeah, because if you were Virgo, we're like, no, you have to learn the algebra and do the algebra every single time. Constituents do vary, yes, but they also have preferences. So while the exact constituents of cottonwood buds is going to vary generally, they're also going to be always sticky and covered with resin. They're always going to have salicylates. And so, so yeah, the other stuff is going to vary. Even the amount of salicylates and the amount of resins is going to vary. But I know that for me, the cottonwood buds that I use, I'm going to use primarily for those resins and for those salicylates and other stuff that we haven't identified yet, because again, we don't want to narrow our focus to single constituents in plants. Yeah. All right, let's do it again so you get some comfort here. All right, let's say that I'm going to make 20 ounces of a boop-de-boop, let's say 65%. I'm going to use a 65% alcohol, and I'm going to make 25 ounces of a plant, right? So my algebraic equation is going to be 25 ounces times what we are desirous of. Your desires are always on top. That's how you remember. You have two numbers of alcohol to work with. Your desires are always on top. What you're having to work with is your foundation. 65%. And say I'm using some Everclear, 151 proof Everclear. Now we're adding another variables now, right? The number is still the same. Your calculator is still going to work exactly the same. So if I've got 75%, we're not going to fudge around with the 75, that extra 0.5% and the 75.5. So that is our equation. 25 times 0.65 divided by 0.75. So 25 times 0.65 is 16 and 2/4. And we divide that by 0.75, and that gives us 21.6666, right? And so we're going to round that to 21.5. 21.5 ounces of what? What is the 21.5? Oh, okay, dear. 21.667, yes. Yeah. So what does that refer to? 21.667 ounces of what? And then how much of the other thing? And yeah, the difference also in that, Terry, is so minuscule. It's not going to make any difference in your finished products. It's just not. So, yeah, exactly. You can just, whatever. It's all okay. Choose your weapon. Okay, I'm going to alcohol. Sasha, you are on fire this morning. Yes. So 21.5%, not percent, ounces of alcohol. 21.5% alcohol, and then 23.5 ounces of water. Sorry, no, 3.5 ounces of water. Yeah, so that's our number. So what we're going to do is we will measuring cup. So in this class, because I'm giving you algebra, I'm being nice, and I'm sticking with imperial measurements, that's the ounces. In the next class, I'm going to be mean, because we're not going to be doing algebra, so I'm going to go to metric. But metric is so much easier to do all of this measurement with. It really is a good idea to use metric measurements when you're doing medicine making. Plus you get all alliterative, which is fun. So we have 21.5 ounces. And also, because lab porn, you get to use graduated cylinders and all of this fun stuff. So we have 21.5 ounces of Holy crap. So this is a problem. I was about to pour that I was about to pour that on my kava, and that's not what we're measuring here. We don't have 25 ounces, and we don't have all of that. Hey, you folks who were actually paying attention, how much, let's see, we were doing 15 ounces, it was 11, it was 10 and a half ounces. 10 and a half ounces of alcohol was what we were using for the kava. Am I right about that? Tell me before I pour this in there. That was just to give you a little bit more experience with the numbers, but that wasn't what we're using for our kava. I'm pretty sure it was 10 and a half, right? Am I right, Terry? I'm pretty sure that was correct. I'm so glad that I didn't do that. That I caught myself in time. And if I had, that would totally be okay. I would just add a little bit more kava to balance it all out. That would be fixable. I would not have to throw that away. That would be okay. But still. Okay, so I've got 10 ounces, 10 and a half ounces of alcohol. And so let me just show you that 10 and a half ounces of alcohol is nicely covering the kava. Great, thank you, Casey and Terry, thanks. So it's covering it, and I've got a nice layer there. I still haven't added in the water yet, right? So our water was 10 and a half, so that's 4 and a half. Thank you, Terry. So I've got 4 and a half ounces of water. There's our kava tincture is done. Now, I'm going to blend this. I'm going to let it sit for a little while to soften, and then I'm going to throw it in the blender so that I can expose more surface area of the plant material. But we can already see that that we've got a good amount of menstruum to our plants. When this settles down, I'm going to have a pretty large layer of menstruum over that, which makes sense because it's a root and it's more dense, right? It's not the mullein, right? This mullein would just be slightly damp if we put this amount of. So this is 3 ounces of kava. Use that amount. This is 1 ounce of the mullein. Would be barely damp if we put that amount of alcohol. That's a 1 to 5 volume of stuff. Solvent. That's enough solvent for 3 ounces, and that's 1 ounce. That's why percolation is our friend. We'll go through that later. I'm gonna label this. Always label your stuff. 15. So yeah, it's 15 times 0.75 divided by 0.95. No, 15 times 0.75 is 11.25. And then that's divided by 0.95. Ah, hold on. 15 times 0.75 divided by 0.95. Oops. See, that's why I rely on you folks to, what did we do? That's so funny. You know, Mickey, I think you're correct. Again, that's totally fine. I'm just going to modify. I'll throw in an extra ounce of kava, and I'm going to modify that. I'm not going to do that on screen because that's going to take a little tinkering. But that is totally fixable. I'll modify that because, yes, you're right. And oops. So what we've got is going to be about a 65%, which is still okay. But we do want that higher amount because that's going to give us more of the constituents that we want and limit the constituents that we don't want. Anyway, but I've gone over time, and so I want to stop there because I want to be mindful of your time, and plus I have a store to open. So I will go through and answer the questions in the comments because I saw that there were some there when I was kind of focused on doing this. If you have any other questions, throw those. Mickey, you're awesome. Thank you very much. Where were you 15 minutes ago? Next week, I will remember on Tuesday, and we will do the same thing but using fresh plants. So fresh plants is similar, but also very different because fresh plants are bringing their own water to the party. And so, by and large, yes, yeah, you get 20 points. You're blowing Casey and Terry out of the water with your points. You get 20 points to your house. So yeah, we'll look at the difference between fresh plant tinctures and dried plant tinctures next week. And then we'll do glycerites and other things. And let me know if there's other medicine making techniques that you want to go over, that you'd like me to go over. And happy to do it. Anyway, have a good day. I will see you next week. Thanks, folks. Bye.